All right, joining me now is Brenden Nunes, who is covering the Sacramento Kings for Sactown 1140, as well as the host of the Kings Pulse podcast. Brenden, thank you so much for joining me this season. Really excited to get to know the Kings this year.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Ryan. I think it's a good idea and glad to be a part of it.
Thank you, man. It's going to be fun. We're going to have a lot of great times here. And I am very excited about the Kings because they are a team that kind of caught the league by surprise last year. This is very reminiscent of, because I cover the Nuggets, this is very reminiscent of the jump that the Nuggets made in the 2018-19 season, where kind of caught a lot of people by surprise, and then they just kind of stuck around. And it took a couple of years after that, but Denver ultimately won a title for the Kings, where you're coming off of this awesome year. What is the most interesting thing about the team heading into this upcoming season?
Yeah, I'll say real quick on your Nuggets comparison. I do use that a lot, and I know that everybody likes to do that, considering that they are the team that just won the chip. But I do think there's a lot of parallels, like having a big that you run your offense through, a dynamic guard that's your other star, and a team that was really getting it done on the offensive end, and now they've just got to figure out ways to clean up the defense. I do think there's some parallels to sort of how the Nuggets started, but I think it's a lot easier to figure out the surrounding defenders when your two stars can shoot, because it's a lot easier to find defenders that maybe have some deficiencies offensively. And that's a lot harder next to De'Aaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis. But I think to your question of what the most interesting thing is that, like, we know what this team is offensively. It's just, can they get better defensively? And they really brought back, I think it's the 8 guys that led the team in total minutes last year. They all brought back. They have some changes to the depth, like Sasha Vezenkov and Chris Duarte, JaVale McGee, that they really like as their backup 5. So there's some differences, but it's really hard to imagine, honestly, that they're going to be that much better defensively with so much of the same core, same rotational guys. They're betting on an increase in physicality being what really does it. And I think we saw them do okay defensively in their first round exit against the Golden State Warriors. Took them to 7 games. Like, I think they did okay defensively, but I think the most interesting thing for how good this team is going to be is, can they find a way to be better defensively? Because the offense is there.
Yeah, and that's very clearly there. And this was one of the best offenses. They were the best regular season offense. I think that you saw bit of those struggles in the playoffs going against a team that kind of matched up a little bit better. But I think that this team, as you sort of learn and you sort of figure out what they're going to do over the course of these next couple of years, they're just going to continue to get better on that end and get more experienced with the chemistry that they continue to develop, sort of like the Nuggets with Jokic and Murray. Uh, I love what De'Aaron Fox has provided. I've loved what Domantas Sabonis has provided. What's the word on Keegan Murray? I think he's the guy that a lot of people are very excited about to see what kind of development he can provide. Had such a fantastic rookie season last year. What's the word on him?
Yeah, I mean, he balled in Summer League, for what it's worth. California Classic, he played both games. He had a 40-piece. And the real thing is the way that he did it. Like, going and dunking on somebody to start the game is like, okay, this is a little different, or a couple off the dribble moves. Obviously he broke the rookie record for most made threes. We know he can shoot. It's just about doing a little bit more. He's kind of compared himself previously, when he first got drafted, to Chris Middleton. And it took me a while to see and believe in that ceiling, but after some of the flashes we've seen this offseason and even in his rookie year, I believe it a little bit. And they certainly are hyping up a big year for Keegan. In Summer League, Luke Lauk's assistant coach, who coached their Summer League, was talking about, there's some people around him that are being like, the last time I saw a leap like this from year 1 to year 2 is Kawhi Leonard. And I think they've tried to temper expectations a little bit. They're not saying he's Kawhi, but they're saying that specifically the jump from year 1 to 2, they're very much hyping it up. Just little stuff of, when he gets the board. Last year, he was very quick to look for De'Aaron or Domas, but just take it up yourself, initiate the offense or attack a closeout with a couple dribbles and make a move from there. And they're going to continue to try to test him defensively. Last year, they're putting him on the Devin Bookers, Paul George, Anthony Edwards. He did okay, which is about what you can expect for a rookie.
Sure.
I don't know that he projects to be a defensive stopper or anything, but they're certainly going to try. And they definitely are expecting a big jump from Keegan Murray, but I have also gotten a little bit of, maybe they are trying to temper expectations because they felt like there was a lot of hype around him and they don't want, it doesn't have to happen this year. It could be next year. Like, he's still young. He's only going into year 2, but there certainly is a lot of expectations for him to take another jump.
He is still so young, and expecting, given how much he, I think, outperformed expectations in year 1 and even into the playoffs, it would be tough to expect him to even do so much better than that in year 2. But who knows? Maybe he's just rewriting the book on what we believed he could be coming out of college, when the word was, hey, this is a solid starter. This is somebody that you believe can be in the league for a long time, but not necessarily that star. Maybe that's changing. And it would be really, really cool and really, really beneficial for the Kings if that did change. So I'm looking forward to watching that along with you. Uh, about the defense, obviously, if he is your defensive stopper, if he's the only guy within the starting lineup that can really get those consistent stops, that's probably an issue. Because I'm looking at the lineup right now: De'Aaron Fox, Kevin Huerter, Harrison Barnes, Keegan Murray, Domantas Sabonis. That's challenging from a defensive standpoint. And even if Davion Mitchell and even Trey Lyles, who I really appreciated his contributions last year, even if those guys are going to be in the rotation, you have to get overall better contributions from everybody across the board in order to make a defensive leap. Do you think that's in this team, or is that still a year away?
I still think it's going to take time. They definitely think that they can take a jump this year, and so maybe I'm wrong, but I think Chris Duarte does stand out a little bit here. He's a guy that they like on both ends of the floor. And, while you look at that lineup, and I agree with you, there's no stopper. Like, if Murray's your best stopper, that's not a great thing, because I don't even know that I'd really call him that. They're just trying to grow him into that.
He might ultimately become that. Like,
right.
we're still waiting on that, of course, but it takes so long to figure stuff like that out over the course of many years in the league. And he's just still so young with that.
Yeah, I agree. I do also think on the other end, if you look through that lineup, like, the only real liability is probably the 2 guard, right? If you go Huerter or Monk in that closing lineup. And that's where Duarte is kind of interesting to me. Like, I think there could be nights where maybe if you don't want somebody on the floor at the end of games, that other teams can be like, give me that guy switched on to me. And that's typically Kevin Huerter or Malik Monk, that maybe you can have Duarte out there as your 2 in closing lineups. And they're pretty optimistic about JaVale McGee as well. I guess this is a theme, but I'm skeptical of JaVale because, to be honest, he was really, really bad last year on a team that needed centers. They needed bigs. They wanted him to start at the beginning of the year. It wasn't going to work. But I always come back to Richaun Holmes, could not get on the floor in Sacramento, and I think that was justified because he didn't fit their play style. But I do think Richaun Holmes is a good player, and ironically, they swapped spots. I think there's some optimism that I can believe in that JaVale would just fit this system better. An extremely high-paced offense. He'll get touches, and so maybe there's something there, but that's only, 13, 15 minutes we're talking about when Domas is sitting. They're not going to play together. I don't think so. And so those are where maybe some of the potential improvements could come. But again, they're really betting on physicality. They keep saying the word physicality. They want to be more physical on both ends of the ball, but specifically defensively. And they say it starts with Fox, defending point of attack and sort of setting the tone. So if he can take a jump in that aspect, maybe there's defensive improvement, and they're certainly hoping. But honestly, I don't feel very good about betting on it when it's the same core, really.
Fair. And it's completely fair. And I have to imagine that a personnel change will come at some point that helps the defense get a little bit better. But the offense is still going to carry the day in a lot of ways. There's no reason to believe that they're going to regress a ton, given that Keegan Murray should develop. And the bench is still fantastic. Having Malik Monk as your 6th man and Davion Mitchell and Trey Lyles coming off the bench, that's going to be very helpful. I do want to ask about Fox and Sabonis. That is a duo, and Fox, I think, really acquitted himself in the playoffs well. Domantas Sabonis struggled, had his struggles going up against the Kevon Looney, Draymond Green pairing. What kind of lessons were learned there that you think that they can take into this next season to ensure that something like that doesn't happen again?
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, the physicality is a big part of this. And I know that I've said that word over and over, but I'm kind of just echoing what they're doing.
Mhm.
I'm telling you, physicality is said over and over again since Summer League into training camp. And I don't think we're going to stop hearing it.
Mm.
But I think that they learn the physicality that comes with the postseason, and they hope to relay that into the regular season. I think more specifically for Sabonis, though, it's that willingness to take that mid-range shot, because Golden State really tried to take away his playmaking, and they were okay with him scoring. And he's just not a guy that likes to play that way. Not that he can't. I think we've seen him do it before. Like that mid-range shot, I feel like we've seen him be a good mid-range shooter, but he just wasn't taking it much last year. It wasn't like part of the flow of their offense. And I think that he talked about at his exit interviews really wanting to improve that mid-range shot. I think we're going to see that a little bit more. And, it's not nothing that he was playing with a broken thumb for
Sure.
most of last season, including the
Yeah.
playoffs. And it wasn't his shooting hand, but I think that plays a factor for sure. And so I think specifically from that perspective, we'll see more just elbow jumpers, just sort of while they're running the DHO. If you're really off of him, that he's just going to pull that. I think that that's what needs to happen a little bit more. And also, you were playing a really, really good team, and they still were right there. They could have
Right.
won that game 7. Everybody always talks about Curry's 50 piece, obviously, but it really was, I think, like 17 offensive rebounds they allowed.
Yeah.
Like Coach Brown will say that it didn't matter what Curry did. They still could have won the game if they would have defensive rebounded and not missed 10 plus free throws, So I still think they were absolutely in it. I think when it comes to lessons learned for Sabonis, though, it's just like being ready mentally to pull that mid range more if you need to.
Couple more questions here. Season win total prediction for this team. Team won 48 games last year. I have them at 46 wins this year, just a slight kind of regression back to the mean, but not enough where I think it's actually going to really affect them. They'll still be a playoff team. They'll still be a consistent force. Uh, the West, I think, has just gotten a little bit better around them with a lot of these teams kind of loading up and maybe figuring some things out. Where do you see this team finishing and with how many wins?
Yeah, they were ridiculously healthy last year, and the organization will counter with what I just mentioned. Domas had a broken thumb the whole year. De'Aaron dealt with that in the postseason. Keegan had a similar, issue that he kind of just kept to himself. Trey Lyles had things he played through, so it's not like there was nothing. But obviously, if you still are able to play through it, the injuries aren't that bad necessarily outside of Domas's broken finger. But yeah, I think they're going to be right around the same range. It's just about really can they be better in the postseason. So I still think, I think your 46 is about right. I think anywhere from like 45 to 50 is kind of what we're talking about. I could see them getting better. I could see a lot of these guys are about 24 to 26. And there's absolutely paths for internal improvement outside of Keegan Murray that we already mentioned. Like Fox is 25. I think Herter and Monk are both somewhere between 24, 26. So these guys are fairly young. It's not insane to think that they could take another jump in their games. And so if that doesn't happen, and they'll probably deal with more injuries than they did last year, but they loaded up on the depth a little bit more that I think will help them be able to survive when those moments come. I think that 45 to 50 range is about right. I honestly, if I have to guess an exact number, I might just go back to the same 48.
Fair. Completely fair. And I hope that they do it, man, because it's more fun when the Kings are good. Because you guys know this better than anybody that surviving this last decade and a half, basically,
17 years. Yeah.
it's got to be frustrating. And so, just having a team that you can really get behind. Do you think that they can recreate the same energy that was there last year and just continue to push forward, lighten the beam?
I definitely think so. Like you already see it at training camp, like spirits are high. These guys really get along with each other. Like one of my personal favorite stories from last year was like Trey Lyles at his exit interview talking about how he never let himself get close to his teammates because he'd been on something like 4 teams in 6 seasons or something
Mm,
like that, which I'm sure you're aware.
sure.
But he actually allowed himself to get close with his teammates. And the word family gets thrown around a lot during this training camp. Like I mentioned, so many of the same guys are back. And such a big aspect of last year was the team chemistry. And I think that starts with Coach Brown, and even higher than that, Monty McNair, Wes Wilcox, Vivek Ranadive, the owner as well. But really, De'Aaron Fox, Domantas Sabonis, like really don't seem to have much ego that is, portrayed. And I think that goes down the line. Like these guys all clearly really, really enjoy playing with each other. And it's so night and day compared to the times when Buddy Hield and Marvin Bagley were around. And nothing against those guys, but like you knew that they were on their way out. It was just a matter of time, and there was a weird feeling around it. And this year they're going into camp. There's no stories to like that need to get sorted before we can just get down to basketball. There's no James Harden, Ben Simmons thing going on. There's no figuring out somebody's injury and are they healthy? Like they are just rolling into this. They have a pre-existing chemistry and get to build off what they started to establish last year. So I do think they're going to continue to keep rolling. And I think their off the court and on the court chemistry is really easy to overlook, and because it's hard to see, right? But these
Right.
guys genuinely really enjoy playing with each other, and I think that was a huge part of last year, and I don't think there's any reason to think that won't change this year.
Well, we will see what happens with the Kings this year. Brenden, thank you so much for hanging out with me. You can catch Brendan's work at Sactown 1140 as well as the Kings Pulse podcast. Thank you so much, Brenden. Good luck this year.
Thanks for having me, Ryan. Appreciate it.